In a storm-swept manner, a blood-red letter lures Hercule Poirot to Ravenwood, where secrets from a wartime scandal lie buried. A scream pierces the night. A historian lies dead with a raven-etched dagger in his chest and a torn piece of sheet. Music hints at a lost sapphire's curse. Who sent the cryptic invitation? Why is a sharp-witted journalist, Elise Varnier, always one step ahead, noticing clues even Poirot misses? As poison, collapsing tunnels, and a crashing chandelier tighten the killer's grip, can Poirot and his unlikely ally unravel a web of greed and betrayal before the next strike? In this deadly game of shadows, every guest hides a motive, and the star of Ravenna's truth could cost them all their lives. Chapter 1. The Crimson Invitation. The autumn rain pattered against the windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, a soft percussion that did little to distract the detective from the peculiar letter in his hands. The envelope, sealed with a wax stamp bearing an unfamiliar crest, had arrived that morning, its contents penned in a striking blood-red ink that seemed to shimmer under the lamplight. The message was brief but provocative, hinting at a gathering at Ravenwood Manor, a secluded estate in the Sussex countryside, where a tragedy of the past threatened to resurface. The sender, cloaked in anonymity, appealed to Poirot's renowned intellect, urging him to attend a weekend soirée to prevent an unspecified calamity. A challenge for the little grey cells, Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching with intrigue. By noon, he was on a train, the rhythmic clatter of wheels carrying him toward a mystery that already stirred his curiosity. Ravenwood Manor loomed against the dusk, its Gothic spires piercing the mist like the jagged teeth of some ancient beast. As Poirot's car wound up the gravel drive, he noted the estate's eerie grandeur, ivy-clad stone walls, arched windows glowing with amber light, and a rotting gate that groaned as it opened. The butler, a gaunt man named Harrow with eyes like polished obsidian, greeted him with a stiff bow. "Monsieur Poirot, the guests await in the dining hall," he said, his voice as cold as the evening air. Poirot adjusted his impeccable suit and followed, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm on the polished floor. The dining hall was a spectacle of opulence, its long mahogany table adorned with silver candelabras and crystal goblets. A fire roared in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across portraits of stern-faced ancestors. The guests, an eclectic assembly, turned as Poirot entered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. At the head of the table sat Lady Beatrice Ravenwood, the manor's widowed mistress, her silver hair pinned beneath a sapphire brooch that caught the light. To her left was Madame Celeste Leclerc, a retired opera singer whose crimson gown seemed to echo the letter's ink, her laughter bright but brittle. Beside her, Dr. Felix Warwick, a nervous archaeologist with ink-stained fingers, fidgeted with his spectacles. Across from him, Victor Grayson, a financier with a smile too smooth for sincerity, sipped his wine with practiced ease. Finally, at the table's far end, sat Elise Varnier, a journalist with sharp green eyes and a notebook tucked discreetly beside her plate. Her presence intrigued Poirot. Most she seemed to observe the room with the same intensity he did. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you," Lady Beatrice said, her voice warm but tinged with strain. "We are honoured, though I confess I'm puzzled as to why you've joined us." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes scanning the room. "A letter, madame, most curious in its nature, suggested my presence might be necessary." His cryptic reply sparked murmurs among the guests, but before questions could follow, Harrow announced dinner. and the conversation shifted to pleasantries. The meal was exquisite roast pheasant, truffled potatoes, and a velvety Bordeaux, but the atmosphere grew taut as the evening progressed. Madame Leclerc regaled the table with tales of her Parisian performances, her hands fluttering like doves, yet her eyes darted toward Lady Beatrice with unsettling frequency. Dr. Warwick, picking at his food, muttered about ancient Mesopotamian relics, his words trailing off whenever someone met his gaze. Grayson, ever the charmer, steered the conversation toward finance, dropping hints of a lucrative deal tied to the manor's history. Elise, however, remained quiet, her pen scratching notes when she thought no one watched. Poirot, ever attentive, noticed her glance linger on a silver music box at the table's center, its lid engraved with a raven in flight, as dessert poached pears in caramel was served. The conversation turned to Ravenwood's past. Lady Beatrice spoke of a wartime gala held at the manor in 1943, where a priceless sapphire, the Star of Ravenna, vanished during a blackout. "A scandal that nearly ruined us," she said, her fingers tightening around her goblet. "Some say it was cursed, bringing misfortune to all who sought it." Grayson chuckled, dismissing the tale as folklore, but Dr. Warwick's fork clattered to his plate, his face pale. Elise's pen paused, her eyes narrowing as she studied the archaeologist. The tension shattered with a scream that sliced through the room like a blade. It came from the library, adjacent to the dining hall, and the guests froze, their faces etched with dread. Poirot was on his feet first, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Remain seated, Mies Amos," he instructed, though Elise ignored him, slipping from her chair to follow. The others hesitated, then trailed behind, drawn by morbid curiosity. The library was a cavern of books, their leather spines gleaming in the glow of a single chandelier. On the floor, sprawled beside a mahogany desk, lay Dr. Archibald Langley, the reclusive historian who had joined the gathering late, his face ashen, a dagger buried in his chest. Blood pooled on the Persian rug, stark against its intricate patterns. Madame Leclerc gasped, clutching Grayson's arm, while Dr. Warwick stammered incoherently. Lady Beatrice stood rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. Elise, however, knelt beside the body, her eyes scanning the scene with the journalists. "Precision, do not touch," Mademoiselle Poirot warned, his voice firm but not unkind. He crouched beside her, his gloved hands hovering over the corpse. The dagger's handle was ornate, etched with the same raven motif as the music box. In Langley's clenched fist was a torn scrap of sheet music, its edges singed as if kissed by flame. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined it, noting the faint notes of a melody scrawled in faded ink. "Curious," Elise murmured, pointing to a smudge of ink on Langley's cuff. "He was writing before he died, but there's no pen nearby." Poirot's moustache twitched, a silent acknowledgement of her sharpness. He rose, addressing the group. "This is no accident. A murder has been committed, and the killer is likely among us." Gasps rippled through the guests, but Poirot's gaze lingered on Elise, who met it with a nod, as if accepting an unspoken challenge. Harrow, summoned by the commotion, appeared in the doorway, his composure faltering at the sight of the body. "I shall telephone the police," he said, but Lady Beatrice interjected, her voice trembling. "The lines are down the storm last night. We're cut off until morning." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their isolation. Sinking in, Poirot took charge, directing Harrow to secure the library and instructing the guests to return to the dining hall. As they filed out, Elise lingered, her notebook open. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "that sheet music hits, not random. The melody is L'Ombre du Corbeau, a rare piece performed here during the war. I read about it in an archive." Poirot's eyes narrowed, impressed by her knowledge. "You are observant, Mademoiselle Varnier. Perhaps you will assist me in this matter." Elise hesitated, then nodded. "If it means finding the truth, I'm in." Her tone was resolute, but her fingers trembled slightly as she tucked the notebook away. Poirot noted the gesture, filing it away in his mental catalogue of details. Back in the dining hall, the guests sat in uneasy silence, the dessert forgotten. Madame Leclerc clutched a silk handkerchief, her earlier vivacity replaced by pallor. Grayson poured himself another glass of wine, his charm fraying at the edges. Dr. Warwick stared at the music box, his fingers twitching as if resisting the urge to touch it. Lady Beatrice, seated like a queen on a throne, watched them all with an unreadable expression. Poirot stood before the hearth, his silhouette sharp against the flames. "Madame et Messieurs," he began, his voice steady, "a crime has been committed, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth. The sheet music in Dr. Langley's hand is a clue, perhaps a message from the killer or the victim. We must consider why he was targeted and what connects him to this manor." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "Each of you has a story, a secret, n'est-ce pas? Tomorrow I shall begin to unravel them." As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the music box. Elise approached, her voice low. "I found something else," she said, producing a small key from her pocket. "It was under the rug, near the body. It doesn't match any lock in the library." Poirot took the key, its brass surface etched with a tiny raven. "Most interesting," he murmured. "You have a knack for discovery, mademoiselle." The chapter closed with Poirot standing alone in the dining hall, the fire casting long shadows across his face. The crimson letter had promised a tragedy, and now it had delivered. But the little grey cells were already at work, piecing together the puzzle of Ravenwood Manor. Elise Varnier, with her sharp mind and hidden key, was an unexpected ally, one he sensed would prove invaluable. As the clock struck midnight, Poirot vowed to bring the killer to justice, the torn sheet music and its haunting melody echoing in his thoughts. Chapter 2. Shadows of Secrets. The morning after Dr. Langley's murder dawned grey and heavy, the storm's remnants cloaking Ravenwood Manor in a shroud of mist. Hercule Poirot stood at his bedroom window, his keen eyes tracing the silhouettes of twisted oaks beyond the glass. The little grey cells hummed with questions, the torn sheet music, the raven-etched dagger, and the mysterious key Elise Varnier had found. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was determined to weave them together. Breakfast awaited in the dining hall, but first he intended to interrogate the guests, their secrets as palpable as the damp air. The dining hall was subdued, the previous night's opulence replaced by a sombre tension. The long table held a modest spread scones, marmalade, and steaming tea, but the guests picked at their plates, their eyes darting nervously. Lady Beatrice, regal despite her pallor, presided at the table's head, her sapphire brooch glinting like a watchful eye. Madame Celeste Leclerc, her crimson gown swapped for a muted grey dress, sipped her tea with trembling hands. Victor Grayson, the financier, maintained his polished demeanour, though his smile was tighter, less convincing. Dr. Felix Warwick, the archaeologist, sat hunched, his spectacles fogging slightly as he avoided eye contact. Elise Vanya, however, seemed alert, her green eyes scanning the room as she scribbled in her notebook, her composure a stark contrast to the other's unease. Poirot entered with deliberate calm, his cane clicking against the floor. "Bon matin, mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "A tragedy has befallen us, but we shall not succumb to fear. I, Hercule Poirot, will question each of you today to uncover the truth behind Dr. Langley's death." Murmurs rippled through the group, but no one protested. Poirot's presence commanded compliance, his reputation a silent force. He began with Lady Beatrice, inviting her to the drawing-room, a chamber of velvet drapes and gilded mirrors. She sat stiffly, her hands folded. "Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, I know nothing of this horror," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of fear. Poirot leaned forward, his moustache twitching. "Madame, the letter that summoned me spoke of a past tragedy. What secrets does Ravenwood hold?" She hesitated, then recounted the 1943 theft of the Star of Ravenna, admitting it had tarnished her family's name. "Dr. Langley was researching our archives," she added. "He claimed to have found something unsettling." When pressed, she shook her head, insisting she knew no more. Next, Poirot questioned Madame Leclerc, whose theatrical flair faltered under his scrutiny. She admitted to knowing Langley professionally, having consulted him on historical opera. "Librettos, he was obsessed with that cursed sapphire," she said, her voice quavering. "He asked me strange questions about the wartime gala, as if I'd seen something I shouldn't have." Her denial of further knowledge felt rehearsed, and Poirot noted her nervous glance toward the door. Victor Grayson's interrogation was a study in deflection. The financier leaned back in his chair, his smile a polished mask. "Langley was a bore, always droning about old jewels," he said, waving a hand. "I deal in modern wealth, not dusty relics." Yet when Poirot mentioned the raven-etched dagger, Grayson's fingers tightened around his cufflinks, a subtle tell Poirot filed away. Dr. Warwick proved the most elusive. His hands shook as he described his academic rivalry with Langley over ancient gem trade routes. "He was digging into things best left buried," Warwick muttered, his eyes darting to the window. When Poirot pressed about the sheet music, Warwick claimed ignorance, but his sweat-beaded brow suggested otherwise. Elise Vanya, questioned last, surprised Poirot with her candor. "I'm here on assignment," she admitted, her notebook open to a page of meticulous notes. "My editor got a tip about a scandal tied to Ravenwood's past. Langley contacted me last week, hinting he'd found proof of a cover-up." She produced a telegram from Langley, its cryptic message urging her to attend the soirée. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mademoiselle, you have a journalist's instinct. But tell me, why did you notice the ink on Langley's cuff?" Elise shrugged, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I notice details. It's my job." The interrogations complete, Poirot retreated to the library, now cordoned off by Harrow. The body had been moved to a cold cellar, but the blood-stained rug remained, a grim reminder. Poirot examined the desk where Langley had fallen, noting a faint scratch mark near the edge, as if something had been pried open. Elise, who had followed uninvited, pointed to a bookshelf. "That's odd," she said, indicating a row of books slightly misaligned. Together, they shifted the shelf, revealing a concealed panel. Inside was a small, locked box, its lid engraved. "With a raven, the key," Poirot said. Turning to Elise, she handed him the brass key from the previous night, and it clicked perfectly into the lock. The box opened to reveal a leather-bound diary, its pages filled with coded script and sketches of a sapphire. Poirot's fingers traced the writing, his mind racing. "This is Langley's work," he said. He was close to uncovering something dangerous. Their discovery was interrupted by a commotion in the hall. Madame Leclerc's voice rose in panic, shouting about a fire. Poirot and Elise rushed out to find the guests gathered around a smouldering hearth in the drawing-room. Pile of papers Langley's research notes, Elise realized, had been tossed into the flames. Without hesitation, Elise darted forward, snatching a half-burnt page from the fire's edge, singeing her sleeve, but saving the evidence. Poirot's eyes widened with approval. "Bravo, mademoiselle," he said, taking the charred paper. It contained a partial map of the manor, with an X marked in the east wing. The guests' reactions varied. Grayson's jaw tightened. Warwick looked faint, and Lady Beatrice's composure wavered. Madame Leclerc claimed she'd seen a shadowy figure near the hearth, but her story faltered under Poirot's gaze. "Someone seeks to destroy the truth," he declared, holding up the singed map. "But they shall not succeed." As evening fell, the storm intensified, thunder rattling the manor's windows. Harrow reported the telephone lines still down, trapping them until morning. Poirot gathered the guests in the dining hall, the map and diary on the table. "This manor holds secrets," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Dr. Langley died because he was too close to them. The sheet music, the dagger, the diary all point to the Star of Ravenna. Who among you knows more than you say?" The accusation hung in the air, unanswered. Elise, standing beside Poirot, caught a flicker of movement. Dr. Warwick's hand, slipping toward his pocket. Before she could speak, a gust of wind slammed a window open, extinguishing the candles. In the darkness, a scuffle broke out, followed by a sharp cry. When Harrow relit the candles, Warwick was clutching his arm, a shallow cut bleeding through his sleeve. "Someone tried to grab me," he stammered, pointing at Grayson, who scoffed. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "No one leaves this room until I say." He turned to Elise, his expression unreadable. "Mademoiselle, your quick thinking saved a vital clue. I trust you will remain vigilant." She nodded, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. The chapter closed with Poirot studying the singed map, its X marking a room in the east wing. The diarist's code hinted at a hidden truth, and the attack on Warwick suggested the killer was growing desperate. Elise, now a trusted ally, stood ready to follow Poirot into the manor's shadows, her notebook a silent witness to the unfolding mystery. As thunder rumbled, Poirot knew the next clue lay in the east wing, and with it, perhaps, the key to unmasking a murderer. Asterisk. Chapter 3. The Phantoms. Melody, the storm's relentless howl, battered Ravenwood Manor, its gusts rattling the ancient windows as Hercule Poirot and Elise Varnier stood in the dining hall. The singed map spread before them. The X marked a room. In the east wing, a clue from Dr. Langley's charred notes that promised answers. The other guests, still shaken by the attack on Dr. Warwick, watched Poirot with a mix of suspicion and dread. Madame Celeste Leclerc twisted her handkerchief, her eyes darting to the shadows. Victor Grayson leaned against a chair, his charm fraying into impatience. Dr. Warwick, nursing his bandaged arm, muttered about curses. Lady Beatrice, ever composed, fixed Poirot with a steady gaze, as if daring him to unravel her home's secrets. Elise, her notebook tucked under her arm, met Poirot's glance with a nod, ready to follow his lead. "Monsieur Poirot, what does the map signify?" Lady Beatrice asked, her voice cutting through the tension. Poirot tapped his cane lightly. "On the floor, it is a guide, Madame, to a truth someone wishes to keep hidden. We shall investigate the East Wing now." His tone brooked no argument, though Grayson scoffed, chasing ghosts in this storm. Madness. Poirot ignored him, gesturing for Elise to join him. The others, reluctant but curious, trailed behind, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls. The East Wing was a neglected relic of Ravenwood's grandeur, its corridors lined with faded tapestries and dust-covered portraits. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and time. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the walls, noting the uneven plaster that hinted at hidden spaces. Elise, ever observant, pointed to a door half concealed by a moth-teen curtain. "That matches the map's X," she said, her voice low. The door, carved with intricate ravens, was locked, but the brass key Elise had found fit perfectly. With a click, it swung open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Careful, mes amis," Poirot cautioned, lighting a lantern Harrow had provided. The group descended, the stairs creaking under their weight. The air grew colder, the walls damp with condensation. At the bottom, they entered a circular chamber, its stone floor etched with a faint mosaic of a raven in flight. In the center stood a dusty phonograph, its horn gleaming like a relic from another era. Beside it was a single record, labeled Lomba. "Du Corbeau," Elise's breath caught. "The melody from the sheet music," she whispered. Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the phonograph's crank. "Let us see what secrets it holds." He wound the mechanism, and the needle scratched to life, filling the chamber with a haunting melody, plaintive, almost mournful, its notes weaving a tale of loss. Halfway through, the music stopped, replaced by a gravelly voice, barely audible. "The Star of Ravenna is cursed. Hidden where the raven watches. Beware the thief's betrayal." The record ended with a hiss, leaving the group in stunned silence. Madame Leclerc clutched her chest. "That voice, it's impossible," she gasped. "It sounds like my old maestro, dead since the war." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame, you performed this melody at the 1943 gala, did you not?" She nodded, her face pale. "I saw a masked figure that night, slipping into the East Wing during the blackout. I thought it was a guest, but then the sapphire vanished." Before Poirot could press further, Dr. Warwick pointed to a stone in the mosaic, slightly raised. "Look," he exclaimed, his academic curiosity overriding his fear. He pressed it, and a low rumble echoed as a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden alcove. Inside was a velvet pouch, empty but embroidered with a raven. "The sapphire was here," Warwick muttered, his voice trembling. "Langley must have known." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "You seem awfully certain, Doctor. Digging for treasure yourself." Warwick flushed, stammering a denial, but Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. This alcove confirms the diary's clues. The killer seeks, the sapphire ore seeks to silence those who know of it." His gaze swept the group, lingering on Grayson's clenched jaw and Leclerc's averted eyes. As they prepared to leave the chamber, a sudden clatter echoed from above. Harrow, stationed at the staircase, shouted, "Someone's outside." The group hurried up, emerging to find the East Wing's corridor in disarray, a vase shattered, a tapestry torn. Elise spotted a footprint in the dust, its tread distinct from their own. Someone was watching us, she said, her voice steady despite the chill in her spine. Poirot examined the footprint, his mind racing. The killer grows bold, but careless. This print is fresh, our adversary is close. He instructed Harrow to guard the east wing and led the group back to the dining hall, where the storm's roar seemed to mock their unease. As they settled, Lady Beatrice offered tea to calm their nerves, her hands steady but her eyes distant. Elise, seated beside Poirot, opened her notebook. "I found something in the archives before coming here," she whispered, showing him a faded photograph of the 1943 gala. It depicted Madame Leclerc singing, Lady Beatrice in the background, and a blurred figure in a mask near the East Wing's entrance. "This matches her story," Elise said. "But look, Grayson's father was there, too. He was a financier involved in wartime deals." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Most interesting, mademoiselle. You have a nose for connections." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp cry from the kitchen. The group rushed in to find Harrow clutching a tray, his face ashen. A teapot lay shattered on the floor, its contents hissing on the tiles. "Poison," he stammered, pointing to a faint green residue in the shards. "I smelled almond cyanide, perhaps." Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her brooch. "That was meant for us," she whispered. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The killer strikes again, but indirectly. This poison was meant to silence us all. He examined the residue, his gloved fingers careful. "Harrow, who prepared the tea." The butler shook his head. "It was already brewing when I arrived. Anyone could have tampered with it." The guests exchanged wary glances, their trust eroding further. Elise, undaunted, knelt by the shards, noticing a faint mark on one a raven's claw, etched delicately. "Another clue," she said, showing Poirot. He nodded, his respect for her growing. "You see what others miss, mademoiselle. This mark links the poison to our other clues, the dagger, the key, the music." As night fell, the storm showed no sign of abating, trapping them in the manor's oppressive embrace. Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, the phonographs. Melody still echoing in his mind. The voice on the record spoke of betrayal, he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Someone here knows more about the Star of Ravenna than they admit. The poison, the attack on Dr. Warwick, the hidden alcoval, point to a desperate attempt to bury the past." Madame Leclerc's handkerchief tore in her hands, and Grayson's smile vanished. Warwick's eyes darted to the door, while Lady Beatrice remained still, her expression unreadable. Elise, standing by Poirot, felt the weight of their secrets, her notebook heavy with notes she dared not share yet. The chapter closed with Poirot and Elise alone in the drawing room, the singed map and diary before them. The raven's claw on the teapot shard lay beside the empty velvet pouch, a constellation of clues pointing to a deeper conspiracy. "Monsieur Poirot," Elise said, her voice firm, "the killer is playing a game, but we're closing in." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Indeed, mademoiselle, the phantom's melody has sung its secrets. Tomorrow we shall follow its echo to the truth." As lightning illuminated the room, Poirot knew the East Wing held more answers and dangers yet to be uncovered. Chapter 4. Echoes in the Dark. The storm's fury had not relented, its relentless winds howling through Ravenwood. Manor's ancient corridors as Hercule Poirot and Elise Varnier prepared to venture into the cellars, guided by the singed maps. Cryptic X, the poisoned teapot, marked with a raven's claw, had heightened the stakes, confirming the killer's audacity. The guests, now confined to the drawing-room under Harrow's watchful eye, simmered with distrust. Madame Celeste Leclerc clutched a rosary, her lips moving silently. Victor Grayson paced, his polished facade cracking with each thunderclap. Dr. Felix Warwick, his arm bandaged, stared blankly at the fire, while Lady Beatrice sat like a statue, her sapphire brooch glinting with cold defiance. Poirot, his mind a whirl of Clouseau Diary's code, the phonograph's haunting voice, the empty velvet pouch, knew the cellars held the next piece of the puzzle. Mies Amos. "Remain here," Poirot instructed, his voice steady. "Mademoiselle, Varnier and I shall explore below. The truth lies hidden, but not for long." Grayson snorted, hunting for ghosts in the dark. "You'll find nothing but rats." Elise shot him a sharp glance, her notebook tucked under her arm. "Better rats than a murderer," she retorted, earning a raised eyebrow from Poirot. With a lantern in hand, they descended the main staircase, the air growing colder with each step. The cellar's entrance was a heavy oak door, its iron hinges rusted but unyielding. Elise's brass key, etched with a raven, turned smoothly in the lock, revealing a spiral staircase that plunged into darkness. The air was damp, thick with the scent of earth and decay. Poirot's lantern cast flickering shadows on the stone walls, revealing cobwebbed arches and forgotten crates. "This is no ordinary cellar," he murmured, noting the faint carvings of ravens etched into the stone. Elise, trailing close, pointed to a narrow passage branching off. "The map suggests it leads to a sealed chamber," she said, her voice steady despite the oppressive gloom. The passage twisted like a serpent, its walls narrowing until they brushed Poirot's shoulders. Elise's breath was visible in the chill, her eyes scanning for details. A faint scratching sound echoed ahead, and Poirot raised a hand, signaling silence. "We are not alone," he whispered. They crept forward, the lantern's light revealing a heavy iron gate, its bars engraved with a sprawling raven motif. Beyond it lay a chamber, its floor littered with broken relics, shattered vases, tarnished candelabras, and a cracked mirror reflecting their distorted faces. Elise spotted a stone pedestal in the center, its surface etched with the same raven's claw as the poisoned teapot. On it rested a small, locked chest, its wood inlaid with mother-of pearl. "Another lock," she said, producing the key. Poirot nodded, but his eyes scanned the shadows, sensing a presence. The key clicked, and the chest opened to reveal a bundle of letters, yellowed with age, tied with a faded ribbon. Poirot untied them, his gloved fingers delicate. The top letter, dated 1943, was signed by A.C. Ravenwood, Lady Beatrice's late husband, and detailed a plan to hide the star of Ravenna in the cellars to protect it from looters during the war. "But it was stolen," Elise whispered, or so they thought. Before Poirot could respond, a low groan echoed from the passage. The lantern flickered, and a shadow darted across the gate. Elise gasped, clutching the letters. Poirot unflinched, raised the lantern, revealing Victor Grayson, his face pale and his hands raised. I followed you," he stammered. "I thought you'd found the sapphire." His eyes flicked to the chest, greedy and desperate. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Monsieur Grayson, your curiosity is dangerous. Return to the drawing-room." At once, Grayson hesitated, then retreated, his footsteps fading into the dark. The interruption unnerved Elise, but Poirot's calm steadied her. They examined the letters, finding a sketch of the cellar's layout, with a hidden room marked beyond the gate. "We must find it," Poirot said, his voice resolute. They pushed the gate, its hinges screeching, and entered a tunnel lined with ancient wooden beams. The air grew heavier, the lantern's light barely piercing the gloom. Elise's foot caught on a loose stone, and she stumbled, her hand brushing a wall that felt unnaturally smooth. "Here," she said, pressing it. A low rumble followed, and a section of the wall slid back, revealing a small, circular room. Inside, a single object stood on a stone table, a cracked glass orb, its surface shimmering with a sapphire hue. "A decoy," Poirot murmured, lifting it. Beneath it was a note in Langley's handwriting. "The star is not here, but its shadow remains." Elise frowned. He knew it was a fake. Why was he killed? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because he knew where the true sapphire is." "Who has it?" Their discovery was cut short by a sudden tremor, the tunnel's beams groaning ominously. Dust rained from above, and Elise grabbed Poirot's arm. "We need to move," she urged. They retraced their steps, the lantern swinging wildly as the tunnel shook. A beam cracked, falling inches from Poirot, but Elise's quick shove saved him. They emerged into the main cellar just as a deafening crash signaled the tunnel's collapse, sealing the hidden room. Gasping, they reached the staircase, the letters and glass orb clutched tightly. Back in the drawing room, the guests leaped to their feet, alarmed by the noise. "What happened?" Lady Beatrice demanded, her voice sharp. Poirot, dusting off his suit, held up the orb. "A clue, madame, and a warning. The killer seeks to bury the truth." Literally, he recounted their findings, omitting the letter's details, and watched the guests' reactions. Madame Le eyes widened at the orb, Warwick's hands trembled, and Grayson's jaw tightened, his earlier intrusion unmentioned. Poirot turned to Elise, his voice low. "Mademoiselle, your courage in the tunnel was admirable. These letters may hold the key to the sapphire's fate." She nodded, slipping the bundle into her notebook. "I'll transcribe them tonight," she promised, her mind racing with questions. As the group dispersed, Harrow reported a new disturbance. Grayson's room had been ransacked, his suitcase appended and papers strewn about. Poirot and Elise investigated, finding a torn receipt for a London jeweller, dated days before. "He's been searching for something," Elise said, her journalist's instincts flaring. "Perhaps the sapphire." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing Grayson's lies. The chapter closed with Poirot and Elise in the library, the storm's roar a constant backdrop. The letters revealed a wartime conspiracy involving Sea Ravenwood and an unknown accomplice, hinting the sapphire was never stolen but hidden to protect it. The glass orb, a decoy, suggested someone had been misled. Langley had paid the price for knowing too much, as lightning illuminated the raven-etched dagger on the desk. Poirot knew the killer was watching, their desperation growing. Elise, her resolve unshaken, met his gaze. "We're close, Monsieur Poirot," she said. "The sellers have spoken, but the manor has more to say." Poirot nodded, the echo of the phantom's melody lingering in his thoughts, pointing to a truth buried deep within Ravenwood's walls. Chapter 5. Masquerade of motives. The storm's wrath had settled into a restless drizzle by the time Hercule Poirot and Elise Varnier gathered the guests in Ravenwood Manor's grand hall, its vaulted ceiling adorned with faded frescoes of celestial scenes. The air was thick with suspicion, the events of the past days, Dr. Langley's murder, the poisoned teapot, the collapsed tunnel weighing heavily on the group. The letters from the cellar, clutched in Elise's notebook, and the cracked glass orbs sat on a side table, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Poirot, his suit immaculate despite the chaos, had devised a bold plan, a reenactment of the 1943 wartime gala, where the star of Ravenna vanished. To unmask the killer, he declared, his eyes gleaming, we must stir the shadows of the past. The guests, though wary, complied, their nerves frayed by isolation and fear. Lady Beatrice, her sapphire brooch glinting, provided costumes from the manor's Attic silk gowns, velvet jackets, and feathered masks evoking the era's elegance. Madame Celeste Leclerc, her theatrical instincts rekindled, donned a sequined dress, her hands steadier than before. Victor Grayson, his charm strained, adjusted a black tie with a scowl. Dr. Felix Warwick, still shaken from the cellar incident, fumbled with a boatie, his spectacles slipping. Elise, at Poirot's request, agreed to pose as a singer, her journalist's poise masking her unease. I haven't sung since school, she whispered to Poirot, who smiled. Mademoiselle, your voice will be the key to unlock their secrets. The hall was transformed. Candelabras flickered, a gramophone stood ready, and a long table held crystal flutes of champagne. Harrow, ever dutiful, had unearthed a recording of Lombardou Corbeau, the haunting melody tied to the manor's secrets. Poirot, in a tailored suit and a simple domino mask, stood at the room's centre, his cane a silent extension of his authority. Madame et messieurs, he began, his voice carrying over the rain's patter. Tonight, we recreate the night the star of Ravenna was lost. Observe, remember, and perhaps reveal. The gramophone crackled to life, and Elise stepped forward, her emerald gown catching the candlelight. She sang the melody, her voice clear and steady, weaving the mournful notes with surprising grace. The guests watched, transfixed, as the music filled the hall, its echoes stirring memories. Madame Leclerc's lips trembled, her eyes distant, as if seeing the past. Grayson's fingers tightened around his glass, while Warwick shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flicking to the shadows. Lady Beatrice stood rigid, her face unreadable. Halfway through the song, Elise paused, as planned, and Poirot seized the moment. Madame Leclerc, he said, his voice sharp, you sang this very melody in 1943, did you not? Tell us what you saw. Leclerc froze, her sequins glinting like scales. I told you, she stammered. A masked figure slipping into the east wing. I thought it was a guest. Poirot stepped closer, his eyes piercing. And did you not follow? Did you not see where the sapphire went? Her breath hitched, and she sank into a chair. I followed, she whispered, too. The cellar door, I saw. A box, like the one you found. I thought it was empty, so I left. I swear I never spoke of it. The admission sparked murmurs. Grayson scoffed. Convenient, madame, to remember now. But Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. And you, Monsieur Grayson? Your father was at that gala, was he not? A financier, with questionable dealings. Grayson's smile vanished. My father's dead, Poirot. Leave him out of this. Elise, resuming her song, watched Grayson closely, noting his clenched jaw. As the melody reached its crescendo, a sudden crash shattered the tension. A massive chandelier, its crystals glittering like stars, plummeted from the ceiling, narrowly missing Poirot. Elise, reacting on instinct, yanked him back, the chandelier smashing into the floor in a cacophony of glass. The guests screamed, scrambling away, but Poirot, unshaken, examined the wreckage. A cut rope dangled from the ceiling, its end frayed but not worn sabotage. "The killer strikes again," he said, his voice calm but icy. This was no accident. Elise, her heart pounding, pointed to a balcony overlooking the hall. "Someone was up there," she said, her voice steady. Poirot nodded, directing Harrow to search the balcony. The butler returned with a small Tula jeweler's loop, etched with a raven's claw. "Grayson's," Warwick blurted, his voice trembling. "He's always fiddling with it." Grayson's face darkened. "Lies. I was here, with you all." Poirot pocketed the loop, his expression unreadable. "We shall see, monsieur." The reenactment resumed, the guests now on edge. Elise, her song finished, joined Poirot at the table where the letters from the cellar lay. One, penned by C. Ravenwood, mentioned a trusted ally who hid the sapphire during the gala. "Not stolen, but concealed," Poirot murmured. "And someone here knows where." He turned to Warwick, whose hands shook. "Doctor, your expertise in gems, did Langley consult you about the star?" Warwick nodded, his voice barely audible. He thought it was still in the manor. He asked about trapdoors. The word hung in the air. Elise, her journalist's instincts flaring, recalled the map's layout. "There's a trapdoor in the East Wing's library annex," she said. "I saw it in an old blueprint." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then we shall investigate." Now the group, reluctant but compelled, followed Poirot to the annex, a cramped room lined with dusty tomes. Elise located the trapdoor, hidden beneath a rug, its edges marked with fresh scratches. Poirot lifted it, revealing a narrow chute leading to the cellars below. "Another path," he said, "perhaps to the sapphire itself." Before they could descend, Grayson bolted, shoving past Warwick and sprinting toward the main hall. Elise, quick on her feet, chased him, Poirot close behind. They cornered him near the grand staircase, where he stood, panting, his eyes wild. "I'm not the killer," he shouted, "but I know who is. Someone's been blackmailing me, threatening to expose my father's role in the sapphire's disappearance." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And who, monsieur, is this blackmailer?" Grayson hesitated, then pointed at Lady Beatrice. "Her. She's known all along." Lady Beatrice's face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on her brooch. "Absurd," she said coldly. "I protect this manor, not its scandals." Poirot studied her, then Grayson, his mind cataloguing their tells. "We shall see," he said, gesturing for Harrow to escort Grayson back to the group in the annex. Poirot and Elise examined the trapdoor's chute, too narrow for descent without risk. Instead, Elise spotted a loose panel in the wall nearby, its edges marked with the same raven's claw. Behind it was a small cache of documents ledgers detailing wartime transactions, signed by C. Ravenwood and an unnamed partner. "Grayson's father," Elise whispered, recognizing the signature. From her archives. He was involved, but not alone. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. The sapphire was hidden to protect it, but greed has resurrected its curse. As they returned to the hall, the guests' accusations flew. Leclerc blamed Warwick, pointed at Grayson, and Lady Beatrice remained silent, her gaze impenetrable. Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. The killer is among us, and their motives are clear, to silence those who know of the star. Tomorrow I shall gather you all for the final truth." His voice was a blade, cutting through the chaos. The chapter closed with Poirot and Elise alone in the annex, the ledgers spread before them. The chandeliers fall, Grayson's flight, and Leclerc's confession painted a web of deceit with the sapphire at its center. Elise, her notebook filled with clues, met Poirot's gaze. "We're close, monsieur," she said, her voice firm. "The masquerade has revealed their masks." Poirot nodded, the raven's claw loop heavy in his pocket. As the rain tapered off, he knew the final confrontation loomed, the manor's secrets ready to be laid bare. Chapter 6. The stars' reckoning. The storm had finally broken, leaving Ravenwood Manor bathed in a pale dawn light that filtered through the grand hall's arched windows. The air was heavy with the scent of wet stone and the weight of unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot stood before the gathered guests, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to their weary, dishevelled appearances. The events of the past days, Dr. Langley's murder, the poisoned teapot, the collapsed tunnel, the chandelier, Foulhard woven a tapestry of fear and deception. The letters, the glass orb, the raven-etched clues, and Elise Varnier's sharp observations had brought Poirot to this moment, the unmasking of a killer. Elise stood beside him, her notebook clutched like a shield, her green eyes steady despite the tension. The guests, Lady Beatrice, Madame Celeste Leclerc, Victor Grayson, and Dr. Felix Warwick sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of dread, guilt, and defiance. Poirot's cane tapped the floor, a deliberate rhythm that commanded silence. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resolute. "A murderer walks among us, driven by greed and fear to silence Dr. Langley and threaten us all. The star of Ravenna, a sapphire thought stolen, has been the heart of this tragedy. Today, I, Hercule Poirot, shall reveal the truth." He held up the singed map, the letters from the cellar, and the cracked glass orb, laying them on the table like evidence in a courtroom. The clues, the dagger, the sheet music, the phonograph, the poisoned teapot point to a conspiracy born in 1943. The star was never stolen, but hidden by C. Ravenwood, and an ally to protect it during the war. Dr. Langley discovered this, and for that he was killed. Lady Beatrice, her sapphire brooch glinting, leaned forward. "Monsieur Poirot, enough theatrics. Who is the killer?" Her voice was sharp, but her hands trembled slightly. Poirot's eyes swept the room, lingering on each guest. "Patience, madame. The truth requires method." He turned to Madame Leclerc, whose rosary clicked nervously. "Madame, you admitted following a masked figure to the cellar in 1943, seeing a box you thought empty, yet you never spoke of it. Why?" Leclerc's eyes widened. "I was afraid. The sapphire was cursed. Everyone said so. I wanted no part of it." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Grayson. "And you, monsieur, accuse Lady Beatrice of blackmail. Yet your father's signature was on the ledgers, linking him to the sapphire's concealment. You sought it, did you not?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "I wanted answers, not blood. My father's debts ruined us. If the sapphire was here, it was my due." Warwick, his spectacles fogged, fidgeted. Dr. Poirot said, "Your expertise in gems made you Langley's confidant. You knew he was close to finding the star. Did you fear his discovery?" Warwick shook his head, his voice a whisper. "I only wanted to study it, not steal it." Poirot paused, letting the tension build. Elise, sensing his strategy, stepped forward, her voice steady. "Monsieur Poirot, the raven's claw on the teapot and the jeweller's loop, they match the dagger's motif. Someone here is obsessed with the sapphire's legacy." She opened her notebook, revealing a sketch she'd made of the manors. East wing, with a circled portrait gallery. Last night I checked the gallery. One portrait of C. Ravenwood has a hidden catch behind it. The guests gasped, but Poirot's moustache twitched with approval. Mademoiselle Varnier, your insight is invaluable. Let us go to the gallery. He led them to the east wing, where dust motes danced in the morning light. The portrait of C. Ravenwood, stern and imposing, hung above a marble fireplace. Elise pressed the catch she'd found, and a panel clicked open, revealing a small safe. The brass key, etched with a raven, fit perfectly. Inside was a velvet pouch, and within it the star of Ravenna sapphire the size of a quail's egg, its facets blazing with deep blue fire. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her brooch. "It was here all along," she whispered. Grayson lunged forward, but Poirot's cane barred his path. "Non, monsieur. The sapphire ends this game, but not the reckoning." He turned to the group, his voice like steel. "The killer is Dr. Felix Warwick." Warwick's face drained of colour, his spectacles slipping. "Absurd," he cried, but his voice cracked. Poirot raised a hand, silencing protests. "Allow me to explain. Dr. Warwick, your obsession with the star drove you to madness. Langley confided in you, revealing his discovery of the sapphire's hiding place. You killed him with the raven-etched dagger, a relic from the Manor's collection, to silence him. The sheet music was a distraction, planted to confuse us with the gala's history. The poisoned teapot was your attempt to eliminate us all, marked with the raven's claw to taunt us. The chandelier, a desperate act when you feared exposure. Paced, his eyes locked on Warwick. You faked the attack on yourself in the dining hall, cutting your own arm to divert suspicion. The jeweller's loop, found on the balcony, was yours, not Grayson's, and the footprint in the east wing. Your boots, which I examined this morning, match perfectly. He produced the loop, its raven's claw glinting. You believed the sapphire was yours by right, a prize for your studies, but your greed betrayed you. Warwick staggered, his hands shaking. "No, I only wanted to protect it." He shouted, then faltered. Langley was going to sell it, ruin its legacy. I had to stop him. His confession spilled out, a torrent of obsession and fear. He'd rigged the chandelier, poisoned the tea, and followed Poirot to the cellar, hoping to destroy the clues. The guests stared, horrified, as Harrow stepped forward, restraining Warwick. Elise, her notebook open, scribbled the confession, her face pale but resolute. Lady Beatrice, her composure shaken, spoke softly. "The sapphire brought nothing but pain. It should have stayed hidden." Poirot nodded. "It will be returned to its rightful place, Madame, under guard." As the morning brightened, the distant sound of a car announced the police, the storm's end restoring the telephone lines. Warwick was led away, his head bowed, the weight of his crimes crushing his scholarly pride. The guests dispersed, their secrets exposed, their motives laid bare. Madame Leclerc wept quietly, Grayson muttered about debts, and Lady Beatrice retired to her chambers. The sapphire left in Poirot's care in the grand hall. Poirot and Elise stood alone, the star of Ravenna gleaming on the table. "Mademoiselle Varnier," Poirot said, his voice warm, "your courage and clarity were my greatest allies. Without you, the truth might have remained in the shadows." Elise smiled, tucking her notebook away. "I'll write the story, Monsieur Poirot, but I'll keep your methods a mystery. The world doesn't need to know how the little grey cells work." Poirot chuckled, a rare sound. "Bean jar, mademoiselle. Perhaps our paths will cross again. As Elise prepared to leave, her suitcase packed with notes for a sensational article, Poirot gazed at the sapphire, its light a reminder of the manor's turbulent past. The hall was silent. The raven's curse lifted, the killer unmasked. Ravenwood Manor stood at peace, its secrets no longer deadly. Poirot, satisfied, turned to the window, the dawn promising a new day, his mind already seeking the next challenge.